dialogues that are created where people can feel the love and feel the person's energy that really like is a balm to them, especially if they have questions that passed away or questions about the relationship. Because a lot of times people are in relationship with wounded selves, right? Like, so their father or mother is old, they're sick, they're not in their prime of their lives. They didn't have the tools to deal with their anger we were talking about before. And they're wounded humans. And when they move into spirit, they're no longer human wound. There might be stuff that they need to communicate and work out still, but they're not in the same pain body when they were alive.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I'm so glad today we've got another wonderful guest to join us. His name is Fred Kluth, and Fred is a wonderful healer. He's a spiritual counselor, therapist, intuitive medium, teacher, artist, and also a wonderful father, from what I understand. So he's really sort of spanning the globe of everything that he does. One of the things that really interests me is he's also a director of something called the Helix Training Program. And this is a transformative training experience that really helps people integrate a psychological awareness and as well as a spiritual practice and holistic healing modalities. So it kind of brings everything into one. And what Fred does is he works with people who are in need of moving out of their fear or problems they might be having or experiencing in their life. And he helps them create a life of joy, a life of abundance by using a lot of different holistic tools that we might not have in the Western world, but they embrace Eastern principles to bring in all of this joy and abundance. Some things include shamanism, somatic practices, inner child work, as well as creative expression. So Fred is a great healer, and I'm so glad to have him with us today. So welcome,
Chris.
Fred.
Appreciate the invitation to be here today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do? Are you mostly a healer? Are you mostly working with people heal the problems of, as you said, the inner child and the pain that, so many people seem to suffer, whether that's self-inflicted or environment-inflicted? What is it that you really focus on?
Well, it's a little bit of both, right? It's self-inflicted and it's the environment. It's that yin and yang that we need to work with. Yes, so I work with a lot of people who have hit a point in their lives, whether through a traumatic experience or through, just realizing that what they've been doing doesn't work. And oftentimes, that is through really having to face their own, unhappiness or, their partner saying enough is enough. We have to make some changes here. And so, many people get an idea about what life should be like when they're in college or when first starting out. They get ideas of how, they want their life to unfold, or maybe they don't, and they just sort of start to just do things, right? And then you get to a certain point, perhaps in your 40s, where all of this really just stops working. And so a lot of people that I work with are going through, what traditionally is known as like a midlife crisis, but oftentimes, I like to rename that as like midlife awakening. It's
So you're sort of awakening to a new you? I love that phrase, midlife awakening. Help me understand what a midlife awakening is. Is it a spiritual awakening, or are you awakening to a new understanding of yourself?
Well, it's also, yes, it's all of those things. And it's giving yourself the opportunity to figure out or figure in what that is, right? So if you've lived a life where you haven't really taken care of your needs, or you haven't developed your creative process hasn't like worked out as you had hoped, or, oftentimes we kind of like get into what we should be doing in this culture. Like we should be working our butts off and paying all our bills. And of course we have to do that, but how we do that and how we balance our own inner needs with the needs of our family, with our culture, with our society. Some people will just start to do the things, but, they don't bring any sort of satisfaction or happiness. It's that like old Talking Heads song, who is this beautiful wife? Whose house is this, right?
Fred, I think you might be dating yourself, but I know where you're coming from.
Well, you knew what I meant, right?
Oh, I did. As soon as you said that, I'm like, ding. Okay, I get it.
Right. So, and it's this kind of, people get to this point in their lives where, maybe it's their Saturn return, where they're like, wait a minute, what I thought was going to bring me happiness and success isn't bringing me any sort of satisfaction. And what do I do to, start to go back to who I truly am? Maybe in childhood you had things that you love to do that you're not doing anymore, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, I really love to make, plastic models or play Legos. Maybe it is that though. Maybe it could be that, because you're an adult. You could do whatever you want to do. Who's to define what you should be spending your time with?
It sounds like, while it may not be the actual end product, like, building Legos, it's still that creativity that you liked as a child that is still within you, that you just have suppressed, and that maybe you want to go back to being creative in some other fashion. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
And tapping into that creative energy is really, we're creative beings. We come onto this planet. We're these amazing, beings that can make things and express our soul's energy and make things that are beautiful. And it can be in any sort of field. It doesn't have to be in the visual arts. People are often creative in their professions and in many other ways, but it's really tapping into that, tapping into that energy. And
so it really sounds like it's really using your right brain, your creative brain, and allowing you to get that creative expression in whatever manifestation it takes to allow you to get to that joyful living state. Is that kind of the direction?
Well, yeah. And even before getting to that, it's really tapping into what's fun, right? Like,
yes.
joy and fun. Like, so the creativity should be fun. And, if we're in this thing, like, oh, I have to be creative now. And, I have, and if you're busy and you have family, like trying to find that time to be creative often is causes angst and pain into it. Right.
It's a chore.
So how do we connect with that joy and that fun? Right. So that our whole life becomes infused with it. Or,
it's like, well, yeah, because it's like, as children, all children do is play. They have play time. That's what children are designed for. That's why they're so darn happy. That's why I love being a child. I am like a child. At least that's what my wife says. I'm okay with it. But yeah, it's that creative expression. It's the inner child that never dies. If you suppress the inner child to the point where it gets suffocated and never comes out, it kind of sits in the dark,
and it can lead to
kind of in the corner,
anger and psychosis and lots of horrible behavioral patterns.
Is that where the phrase what's it called, the dark night of the soul or something? Is that where that comes from? Where the inner child is so suppressed and so thrown in the corner that there's no way for it to get out, and it's seeing and dealing with its darkness because it can't do anything.
Yeah, that's a good good way to look at it, right? Like it's that energy of despair, that energy of sadness, the lack of hope. Those are all things that whenever you have a feeling that's bigger than you can handle, right? Like that's a good sign that your inner child is kind of running the ship, right? Like when you feel like you're overwhelmed or you have a hair trigger anger, or you start to call people names, or, like start to behave like a child, and you don't have the faculties to be able to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't start swearing at that person. Like little kids, they just start to yell and scream and cry. Right. And, a lot of times if you're not, I hate the term managing your anger, right? Because like the idea of just management of your anger is really not really like
wasn't that Robert De Niro, anger management? Or something?
Yeah, no, anger management. That movie. But it doesn't, to me, it says like, you're always going to be angry. So you just have to manage the destruction that you're going to cause. Whereas I really think that there is an ability to, with talking, like connecting with your inner child, learning good communication patterns, understanding that, in this culture, we've had no instruction on how to deal with our anger. We've been told, okay, count to 10. Don't get angry. Don't punch anybody. Go to your room. Right? If you're too angry, because our parents weren't trained.
Keep your hands to yourself, or whatever the phrase is,
or, touchy. Or even worse, I'll give you something to cry about, like,
oh yeah, right.
That makes you afraid of your own ability to express your anger. And inviting, as adults, we have the opportunity to really like do the work so that we are inviting all of those younger parts of ourselves into the room and seeing like, okay, what was happening when we were children that didn't allow us to have a healthy expression of our anger, right? Because anger is an energy.
Right.
And you know what? There's a lot to be angry about in this world. And if we can harness that anger and really make changes, it's a different thing.
So you touched on energy, and it's a great segue, because I'm curious how all of this touches on our intuition, the energy that's around us, the spirit that's around us, because clearly when we're dealing with the frustration, the anger, the inner child, the emotions, the lack of creativity, or its opposite, the joyous creativity, those are different vibration states. And if we're dealing with different vibration states, then we're dealing with different levels of accessing spirit, the ability to access that connection, or the types of connection that we actually get. So maybe you can kind of walk us through how this whole healing program helps us to also connect with spirit, and how spirit would ultimately help us.
Two things come to mind. The first one is the AA program. Right? Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? Because in that program, there's a real onus on connecting to spirit. Right? So people, in a lot of ways, can't get over their addiction unless they give themselves over to something bigger. Right? Like in finding hope and connecting to spirit, that gives them the kind of like the energy and the hope that allows them to make transformations.
Right. And from what I understand, the AA 12-step program, it's really sort of to your point, it's a giving themselves over to a larger power, regardless of what that particular name happens to be, or that particular entity happens. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I'm not talking like their program often is wrapped in the language of Western culture of God and things like that. But I'm talking about at the essence of like making transformations in your life, right? Like it really helps to make long-term by developing your relationship with spirit, and whatever that looks, right? Like everybody has an individual relationship to their own divinity or their own divine essence or their own energy, and connecting to that is really important. And through the Helix training program, one of the things that was essential in that training, it's a non-denominational training. So it doesn't go in and say, okay, you have to believe in God or you have to believe in shamanism, right? These are all kind of tools and ways to access this inner and outer energy. And Julie Winter, who's one of the founders, one of her teachings, which I really resonate with, is when we sit with our clients or we sit with people, we're sitting with their entire essence, like their healed self, not just the part of them that is coming there because they have anger issues or they're, or they've, they're unhappy with their lives. So you're holding space for their entire healed being.
So it sounds like you're working with a client who is not just their physical aspect. It's physical. It's body, mind, spirit, soul, the whole package.
And their own, and helping them develop their own connection to their inner children, to all of their parts of self, and to their divine essence is really the goal. Because once they can start to trust themselves and trust their connection to spirit, that's when real transformation, that's when the joy can come. That's when they can start to make the changes that help realign themselves from, that crisis that we were talking about, where they've like kind of gone down their railroad track of the things that they were supposed to be doing. And then then they're like, oh man, I don't really want to be doing any of this right now. What do I do now? How do I transform my life?
So, let's kind of go backwards a little bit, if we will. How did you get into this program? It sounds like this was something that's very personal to you, that you experienced it so that you can then turn around and, give that beautiful benefit to other people. What was your experience? What was your childhood? Was your inner child kind of locked in the closet and, you're like, let me out?
I think, boy, that's a really complex question. I think there are like 2 or 3 different tracks in that, right? Like, so at an early age, I was very intuitive and I was having experiences that were not getting mirrored back to me. I would see spirits or I would have really strong intuitions, and I'd be like, did you see that? And, like it was like crickets. And, and my curiosity of it was also not returned, right? Because I grew up in a Catholic, environment, and anything that's not, like anything like a Ouija board or a ghost or anything like that is like, no, you can't explore them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, I'm really interested in that, so there was like belly, and
Sure.
me just sort of like trying to find answers to these things that I was experiencing. When I was about 16, I got jumped, by a person. I would sneak away with my girlfriend. We were in a place that we shouldn't have been. Somebody showed up and attacked her, and I fended her off.
Oh.
And I got my butt kicked in a really serious way. And I, like, at one point I felt my body, my soul leave my body. And, was like kind of having an out of body experience while I was getting attacked. And, when I came back and I was able to fend myself off from this person, I had even more questions,
Wow.
And
so you kind of had an almost an ADE of some kind.
And, and not having, and then then I went, then I had trauma on top of all these questions. And it wasn't until college that I started to, explore it a little bit, but not necessarily in a great way. I had an experience with witchcraft, white witchcraft, which was very transformative. And it really kind of brought hope back to my life, and I was able to kind of like start to talk about these things that I was very curious about, and have people that were like, oh, I know what you're talking about, rather than like, what is he talking about?
Sure. Sure.
And that ended up falling apart because I started to get romantically involved with another student, and the teacher didn't like that. And, and then I had another strange experience where, I was forbidden to talk. Like, I was told I'm not allowed to talk about anything. This is all secret, and you're not allowed to talk about any of it. And
You're in the secret
Yeah, it was a
society.
secret society, but I was 19 and I was not able to keep secrets.
Okay. Sure. Yep.
But one of the things that another time I got physically attacked was when I finally was able to say, my friend was like, what happened years later? And I was like, let me tell you. But, you know, after trying to keep a secret for so many years, because I was told if I ever talk about it, all my powers would be taken away, you know, like all this kind of stuff.
Brother.
And then I got attacked again after that. When I told him, like, on the way home from a bar, we got you. So then I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I can't talk about anything to anybody. I'm cursed.
No.
And then years later, I met my wife, and Diana and I connected in a way that I had never connected with before. And she understood a lot of the experiences that I had and were open to it in a different way than I had ever been able to talk to anybody. And she was doing this program, long story, this Helix training program.
Oh, she was
had been working with Alberto Vielo, who was Dr. Alberto Vielo is a man. He wrote Shaman Healer Sage, and she went to healing sessions with him. Some of his students had been working in the Helix. And so we fell in love, we got married, the opened up, we joined it. And, so newlyweds, we did this 4-year program, and it was super intense. It gave us a great language to be able to speak to each other with, because, you know, a lot of other people were like, I'm trying to go home to my husband and talk to him about what he's projecting onto me, and, you know, with his psychological wounds. No idea. You know, so we were able to really start our relationship on this really strong baseline. And,
Great.
And I wasn't able to kind of like step fully into my role as a Helix practitioner until the pandemic, really, because I was working in New York City and wasn't able to like take on clients or anything because I never knew when I'd be home. So the pandemic gave me the opportunity to be able to start seeing clients in a more consistent way, because I could just jump out of Zoom at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, and everything was remote, so you could actually begin to practice
and have
that
to
way.
deal with New Jersey transit. So
yeah, right, exactly. Which is a fun thing, isn't it? So let's go back a second. You mentioned you had sort of an out of body experience. You had contact with spirit. So what was when you were first connecting with spirit? What was your feeling like? What were you feeling? What were you experiencing? What were you sensing? What were your experiences with your communications with spirit when you were young?
Well, when I was really young, one of my first memories is saying goodbye. Right. Like he was in the hospital and I was having dreams about him, and he was like waving goodbye. And I was really, and, you know, so I remember that. I remember having like deja vu and like being like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. Like really more than deja vu, like premonitions, you know, and things like that.
Premonitions. Right.
And then when I was physically assaulted, the experience for me was very much like feeling all my past lives and all my future lives at the same time, like sort of like coming out of time and feeling like the immensity of my spirit, right? Like, so seeing my future life in this realm, and then also being like feeling into, oh, I was this in that life, I was that in this life, you know, so it was very much like taking out, like being able to step out of the continuity of the here and now and be able to kind of see future and past. And at the same time, while this person was taking a rock to my head, I was feeling my hands being guided to move my hands like over my temple to protect myself. Like I was literally feeling that, you know, like.
So there was energy moving parts of your body that you didn't realize were getting moved.
Exactly.
Did you, when you were working and realizing your different lives, past current and future, did you begin to understand that everything was all happening simultaneously, that you could realize that it was all simultaneous lives, but all in the same second, because there was no differential between time?
I don't think at the time I knew that. I've come to a better understanding of it. Right. Like, and my understanding of it now is, and my experiences with it now is really amazing, because I've had, sessions with people and held space for people and worked on myself where I feel that, we're mirroring a lot of the things that we have experienced in other lives, and we can simultaneously heal this life while healing other. We can connect with spirit. Like I believe that sometimes spirit comes through because they have unresolved things that they want to kind of get through. And by us kind of making these kind of connections and changes, it changes something for them as well. So there's like a co-healing happening that I've witnessed and experienced that has really been beautiful and fascinating.
Interesting. That sounds almost parallel to the concept of spirit guides, that spirit guides are growing spiritually as they have us grow spiritually. So they have a vested interest in our spiritual growth. Yeah. Because as we grow, so too do they.
Which is such a beautiful concept in life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, talk about a vested interest.
Yeah.
Who needs a 401k when you got that? But yeah, that's absolutely great. So, perhaps you can touch on, your mediumship. Are you doing mediumship for clients, and what are some of your takeaways from your connections with spirit as a result of all your mediumistic connections for your clients?
Yes, I do mediumistic readings, and I do channel readings, and at 4:00 on Fridays I do an Instagram live where I open up the channel for people who want to show up on Instagram for me. And the work there is such an incredible process, because I believe that we are as intuitives and mediums and connecting with the energy of people that have passed and people that are the energy of these people are in our lives constantly. And whether we're conscious of it or not is kind of like the opening, right? So we have the ability to kind of like drop a little bit deeper into our interaction with these energies and resolve things like I had just talked about, right? Like sometimes there's unresolved questions or messages that, need to get communicated, right? And which could open up communication with people, like especially if there were family secrets, right? Like I've held space for people where I'm like, the spirit is telling me this, and they've been like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then I've gotten messages afterwards where they've, said something to their mother about what spirit came, and the mom is like, how do you even know that? But it also opens up a dialogue and a communication, because when there's secrets, there's energy that's held back. Right. And if and a lot of people that grew up in families with lots of secret are highly intuitive, because they know there's something that's not being, right. And so they're always like kind of looking for it. They could feel it, but they can't necessarily tell what it is. So sometimes, these kind of doors open that allow for communication, that allow for healing, right? There's sometimes energy or dialogues that are created where people can feel the love and feel the person's energy that really is a balm to them, especially if they have questions passed away or questions about their relationship, because a lot of times people are in relationship with wounded selves, right? Like, so their father or mother is old, they're sick, they're not in their prime of their lives. They didn't have the tools to deal with their anger we were talking about before. And they're wounded humans. And when they move into spirit, they're no longer human wounded. There might be stuff that they need to communicate and work out still, but they're not in the same pain body that they were in when they were alive. And they were able to communicate how much they love someone or apologies for how they behaved that you may or may not have been able to do as humans.
Right. So you're finding that they come back in a message that they are now unfettered to allow themselves to be able to express what it was that they were unable to express while they were in the physical, and that's something that makes me realize what you were talking about at the very beginning of the show. The times when we're unable to express ourselves because of that wounded inner child. And you were just saying the spirits no longer have that inner child to worry about, so that as a result, they can express
because they're whole. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's the ego mind. It's the inner child relationship with that ego. That's all been left behind, and now they're able to fully express what it is that they need. And every time I do a mediumship reading, the joy that comes through and the critical importance of the joy that they express to their loved one left behind, they're trying to get them to live their life to the fullness and receive full joy in their life. That seems to be like the overwhelming imperative.
It's so true. It's so beautiful. Well stated.
And it's I love the way, because that's when I connect with spirit, that's one of the ways that I find that they're trying to bring through that love. It's a transformative love, but that transformative love and joy itself is a fundamental healing. That seems to be the bottom line that they're trying to do. Heal in any way, shape, or form that they can do it. Whether it's express the joy, express the love, express the forgiveness, and bring healing to the person in need, which is very much like what you were talking about with Helix.
Very much so. It's such a beautiful place to work, and it's a beautiful space to hold for people when this happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've been talking about healing for a lot. Is this sort of a fundamental imperative for everybody to try to find healing for themselves? How critical is it that we all go out and get ourselves healed? Because I know there are countless, probably a large majority of people who walk the planet saying, "Oh, I don't have any problems. I'll either deal with it, or B, I'm okay and I don't need your help."
Yeah, I really, I feel everyone's on their own path, and some people this works for. Maybe some people aren't ready for it, right? Like, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were in a culture where these things could be openly discussed and right and accepted, and people could be curious about it. And I think that until we have there's a lot of movement on this, right? Like, more and more men are showing up in these circles, and I think that women have been in these circles a lot, especially over the last 30 years. Men are now starting to show up a little bit. And I think that that is really a door that's opening up, that people are realizing that, what we have been, what we're fed in our culture and our capitalist television culture, or internet culture now, dating myself again, isn't really always about, this kind of self practice, right? And it really is practice, right? It's a really like, oh shit, I just got really mad about something at the supermarket and I really acted like a jerk there. Why is that? What needs of mine are not getting? And that, that's a mindset, right? It's a curiosity, and, it's an ability to own our behavior in a way that needs to be supported in our culture, rather than like, haha, look at how mad they got. Let's put it on the internet, and make fun of each other and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me ask you, is the rapid evolution to a quick anger state, a function of the environment and our fast-paced environment that we live in, or is it more deep-seated within the individual?
I think it's really deep-seated in our culture and our individual, right? Like, so I don't, like I had mentioned before, we're not given, our generation certainly was not given the tools to be able to like communicate our, right? And our previous generations were not, so we have like 7 generations of people that have never really had space for their anger, right? And have like an ancestral trauma around us. So as we start to do the work, right? Like, and this kind of taps into what we were talking about with best spirits coming and trying to communicate love and appreciation. This is a generational healing that's happening so that we can show up to the people that are starting their lives and are, younger than us as, we're probably not elders yet, but we're getting there, right? Like to be able to hold space for and show a different way. And
although, tell my son that, and he says I live in the Stone Age. So,
so modeling and, like the other day I was at Barnes and Noble, right? And we homeschool. We used to have a homeschool discount. And the last time I went, I got 20% off. But now, they changed and I got really crappy. Right. And I was just like, all right, I don't want that. I want my 20%. And I was kind of a jerk, but I didn't really think about it until I left. And then my daughter was like, you were a jerk, Dad. And I was like, oh, I was a jerk. And I went back and I apologized. And I just said, hey, I'm really sorry. I was disappointed about the thing. It's not your fault. You're not the person that made this policy. So I'm sorry. And I left.
Yeah. It's fascinating you mentioned that, because the fact that your daughter called you out on that, my son does the exact same thing. So I'm not sure if it's the fact that their generation is much more sensitive, or it's they're just more observant of like us as parents. Do you think it's a generational thing, that they're more sensitive to that kind of reaction?
I think, I don't know how, I could talk about how we've raised my daughter. My daughter is very astute, and we've given her the space to be able to express herself and not worry about calling us out. Right. Like, whereas I wouldn't have necessarily been able to say, to my family, my parents, like, ooh, that was kind of crappy what you just did. Like,
we'd be on the backside of something.
Could very well be, or at least yelled at and screamed at, like to embarrass,
right.
To embarrass our elders that way.
That was not our place. We don't do that.
Exactly. And, I've just raised my children to sort of like be able to have a voice and to take it serious, because they observe things that, they're new on this planet, at least, in this lifetime. And, they're having a different experience, and she's constantly telling me I can't say them. So I'm like, I can say them. I grew up in New Jersey, like in the 80s. She's like, no, Dad.
Look at all the things I can say. Hey,
it's like, no, Dad, you can't. Please don't say that. I'm like, all right, do my best.
Wow. Well, at least she's telling you politely.
Most of the time.
Most of the time, as far as the rest of us know. Yeah, it's kind of like in Vegas. What goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. We don't want to know. Well, interesting. So it really sounds like if a person is feeling that they've got some kind of either inner child work or healing work or anger issues or things that they need to resolve, almost everything seems to be revolving about what we opened up at the top of the show about getting to that creative state, allowing yourself to open up. I mean, you're a teacher. You're an artist, and that's very creative. So it's not like allowing ourselves to get back to that creative state so that we can open up again, it gets me almost thinking that's like turning on the spigots. Just allow yourself to flow. Get back in the flow of things. That kind of sound right? What
and it doesn't necessarily have to be sit down and do visual, right? That's what I love to do.
Right.
It could be ice skating. It could be dance. It could be anything that makes you feel uplifted and alive and joyous, right? And everybody's a little bit different, but it's really giving yourself permission for that time. And also not to have a lot of expectations, right? Like, so it doesn't,
important.
It doesn't have to be in your side hustle or, like your other job, right? Like even detaching it from that and just doing it because you love to do it is really the essential magic in it, because that's where you can infuse your life force into it. Once you start to be like, wow, now I have to do this schedule and, now I'm going to make a website out of it. That all could come, but really that even when you're doing that, you still need to do this. You need to still be tapping into your creativity and your joy, no matter how you manifest it.
Allow the joy to come to the surface. And that suddenly makes me think joy guide and how critical it is to tap into and connect with our joy guides, because our joy guides literally will help us tap into that and really lift us to that vibration where we can experience the joy in life, because that's what we're here for. We not only have we come to this dense material plane to experience lessons, but we're also here to experience the joy of a physical life in a dense existence. It's a completely different experience than a person can experience in a non-physical state where it's just amorphous. Where here the joy is very visceral, very tangible, and it's a different kind of joy, a very quick joy. So if we can tap into that joy and get help from our joy guides or whomever else, that's the power to really tap into.
It's really beautiful. I love that idea of joy guides. My father used to also say that happiness wasn't something that we just get, right? Like we're not just happy. It's something that we actually have to work at, right? So it has to be, he would treat his happiness almost like a hobby. So he knew what the things were that brought him joy and brought him happiness, and he would do them. And he would do them and consciously make that space for those things in his life so that, he was able to cultivate. And I love that. That's a guide that I've really done my best to keep working to. And it's a North Star for me. It's not like the world isn't going to just let you be happy. You have to work at
it. It's kind of, what's the phrase? Anthropomorphic, or I don't know if that's the right word. It's almost an opposition in the very definition. It's like you want to experience joy, but the world's going to try to prevent you from experiencing it. So you've got to work harder to get it because you've got forces that are going against you, and your very efforts.
The weird thing is that because we are so bound in like to-do lists and achievements and like kind of like this left brain, X, Y, and Z, do this, you get that, you do this. Joy isn't like that. Like joy is this energy that you have to invite in and you have to cultivate this relationship with, and you have to pay attention to it. You have to make it a nice cup of tea. You have to and
it's random.
You have to love it. Like you do, heart in a way. Stephen Pressman.
I was just going to say, joy is also the randomness to derive pleasure from anything that comes your way at any time in a random fashion.
So being present,
Yeah. Oh, the present moment. Absolutely. Finding joy and gratitude also comes to mind. Finding the joy in those things that you're grateful for in your life, even if they're tiny. No matter how small they are, it could be the cup of coffee. It could be the food that you're eating. It could be the clothes you're wearing. It could be the roof over your head. Just the little things that we all take for granted, right? If you're happy just with those tiny little things that we all take for granted that we forget about every day, suddenly you're joyful. for those little things. You're like, wow, life's
Right.
pretty good. I'm happy.
And you could actually cultivate a gratitude practice, right? So you
Yes,
can
absolutely.
make lists of things that you're gratitude about. You can talk to your partners about, what are you grateful for today? What are you grateful for about tomorrow? Right. And really like bring those kind of conscious practices in to help cultivate that joy and that love in you.
If you were to talk to a listener and give them a simple guide as to how they can work with a gratitude practice, what would you say? What would you tell them?
Well, I would start a conversation or a journal practice of writing down what we're grateful for. And it could be anything to, my employment, my clients, my practices, my partnership, the way that we communicated about this podcast, right? And working with you, Chris, I'm very grateful for that, right? And bringing those things into our conscious memory and giving gratitude for the gratitude and making this a daily practice. That would be the best way to do it. And sharing that gratitude. And so it's not just like, hey, I made a nice journal entry about all the things that I'm grateful for, but inviting people into that by saying like, hey, can I share something with you? I'm going to share how grateful I am about what that interchange that we had today, or, how you did that, this thing, or I observed this in you. That makes me feel grateful. You taught me a lesson, right? Like, so creating a dialogue or even sharing like, hey, can I share this gratitude list with you? And then can you share one with me? Right. So you're creating a dynamic where people are sharing the things that they're grateful for.
I like that sharing aspect because that brings the humanness together as opposed to just doing it individually, in the darkness where you write your gratitudes and, you're hiding behind, some desk or something. And you're like, okay, well, I don't want to look in like you're a troll in the dark. You don't want to, anybody you see is it's like, come on out and share your gratitude and let the world know how happy you are.
Yeah. And it gives you the opportunity to understand what's important to the people that you love. Because
and not only that, but you can also derive even greater happiness and joy by sharing that joy with random strangers, by doing random acts of kindness, smiling at somebody on a sidewalk, picking up somebody's newspaper and
saying
giving
thank you.
Whatever. I mean, yeah, thank you. Just random acts of kindness will blow somebody else's mind away. It's like the example I always use is imagine or remember the last time somebody did something, some random act of kindness for you that you just didn't even know. And somebody smiled at you. How you felt it impacted you 10 times more than it did them. So imagine if everybody did that around the globe, what a different world we'd be living in.
Yeah, it would be beautiful.
We'd be living in this high vibration joy.
Yeah, and boy, we need that, right?
Totally, especially where the world is today. We need a lot more joy. We need a lot more random act of kindness,
gratitude,
and a lot more gratitude, and it doesn't take anything more than moving the muscles on your face to turn them into a smile.
Yeah.
Even if it hurts you, just smile and just go, oh, I'm smiling at you. Damn it, I'm smiling at you. Oh, that was the other thing. It's like there's a something in psychology that says if you force yourself to smile within 30 seconds to a minute, you'll start to feel happy despite yourself. Despite your best efforts, you will start to feel happy if you just begin to fake a smile. You'll be like, oh, yeah. You'll start to feel happy just with a smile.
And then there's the one thing I love is like laughter yoga. Have you ever done that?
Laughter yoga? No,
oh my God,
I've never heard of that.
Check that out. It's this practice where you fake laugh, right? You start to fake laugh, but then it turns into a real laugh. And then you do a session where you just laugh with people and it just opens up their hearts and it releases all the endorphins and it's just amazing. Laughter yoga is so much fun.
Well, you know what they say, laughter is best medicine. Who needs the pharmaceutical industry when you got laugh yoga? Right? Who needs doctors? Who needs, all those heart pills? We don't need that. Let's get laugh yoga. That'll open up everything.
Because then even if you are sick, you get to laugh about
it. Oh, exactly. Well, there's so many stories of, for example, like people getting sick or people who have cancer that suddenly go into spontaneous remission because they've been specifically doing laughter practices over the period of like 3 months, every single day watching funny shows and what have you. And there's so many cases of this, and their doctors just are flummoxed.
Beautiful.
Well, it's the laughter, and that's what they do. They intentionally do it. So it's all in the intention, which kind of comes full circle. It's like, you got to set the intention and the direction you're going. If you do that, then that's really kind of what's going to help.
Right. And if we set the intentions towards joy, peace, and creativity, wow, what a world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Fred, what would you say would be if the single most important recommendation that you think you could give to some person who's listening to the show today?
I think learning how to love oneself, accept ourselves, and be at peace is really the biggest recommendation one can do. And there's so many ways to do that. And sometimes it requires a little work, and sometimes it requires challenges to ourselves and the way that we look at ourselves, but being open to making those changes in ourselves so that we could open up our hearts more. What is it that we need to do to choose love?
Oh, I love that. That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Fred. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you or they want to, work with you, or how can they?
Well, my site is fredkluth.com, FredKluth. And I'm on Instagram at Fred_Kluth. And then you could find out about the Helix training program at helixtraining.org.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Fred, for being on the show. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. Stay tuned for the next episode coming up next Wednesday, when we're going to continue talking about healing. We're going to talk about spirit and how we can all connect. So I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. And this is Chris signing off for now, sending you love and light. Until next time, bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.